Our next story is a mystery about two women who simply vanished. They lived near each other in a picturesque part of North Wales, and they were last seen in the same vicinity. And yet they went missing 2 years apart. First of all, Mrs. Peggy Goodman. She lived alone, and though she was 81 years old, she was far more energetic than many people 20 years younger. She frequently went hiking, attended demonstrations for CND, and sometimes went away from home without telling anyone. She was last seen near her home 6 days before Christmas in December 1982. And then on January the 4th this year, a second woman went missing from just down the road. Our reconstruction is in English, though the community usually speaks Welsh. The place is a village set beside the River Dee called Corwin. It's a few miles from the tourist centre of Llangollen and on the A5.
On the 4th of January this year, Mrs. Myfanwy Jones disappeared without trace, just half a mile from where Mrs. Goodman was last seen. Myfanwy has been a popular and well-known figure in the small community of Corwin. Happily married with a 20-year-old son, the family have lived in the town for over 21 years. One Friday afternoon, 4 months ago, Myfanwy was visiting a friend in nearby Cloudponkin.
Well, we didn't go very far from Corwin. We just drink and drive. That's right.
I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
I'm very grateful to you for helping me.
Oh, it's no trouble,
Yes.
no trouble.
I'll be off now. Right?
Right.
And I'll definitely see you Monday.
Remember to call.
Yes, I will.
Have a nice time tonight.
Oh, yes.
Unaware that she'd missed the bus, Myfanwy left for home. She was looking forward to going out to dinner that evening with her husband and friends, and she wanted to be home early to get ready. The time was 4:20 in the afternoon of Friday, the 4th of January this year.
Mrs. Griffiths, I've missed the bus. I'm going to walk. 9 times out of 10 I will get a lift. Cheerio!
Ta-ra.
This woman is the first of several witnesses who were to see Myfanwy as she started to walk the 1.5 miles home.
Hello, Myfanwy.
A few minutes later, she was seen by these two men who lived nearby. As she continued to walk, a witness driving towards her spotted her, and opposite, a man standing by a blue Vauxhall Viva. This man has never been identified. There were several sightings of Myfanwy as she passed the small housing estate at Myfanway. But it was the driver of this red car who was the last person we know to see Myfanwy Jones. She'd now walked half a mile. What happened to her next is a mystery. 5 minutes later, further down the road, a passing motorist found this deerstalker hat. It wasn't Myfanwy's, and no one has yet claimed it. A couple were later seen arguing on this bridge shortly after Myfanwy vanished, and on the same route that she would have taken home. So what did happen? Police need your help with the following. They need to identify the man standing beside this light blue Vauxhall Viva, who appeared to be watching Myfanwy as she walked past. This was the last sighting of Myfanwy by the driver of the red car. What happened next? Did she accept a lift? If so, since she never got home, was she driven away from Corwin down here to the right, or straight on to Carrag Lane? It was here that the deerstalker hat was found. Is it yours, or do you know who it belongs to? It's possible Myfanwy may have taken a short cut through this farm. She would have rejoined the main road here, where the couple was seen arguing. police need to trace this couple. Faced with severe weather conditions which hampered their searches, teams of police frogmen were sent in to sweep a 16-mile stretch of the River Dee. Air and ground searches were made over difficult terrain. And villagers joined the police in scouring the countryside. But so far, nothing has been found. Police are certain Myfanwy Jones would not, of her own choice, have left the home and family she loved, and they now fear for her safety. Her husband, Emir, and son, Keith, wait anxiously for news.
Well, the hardest part of it has been the waiting and the not knowing what has really happened. It's been a great burden, really, to think one day after the other, nothing, no answer coming to the problem at all. If anybody has got any information, however small, if they would kindly come forward and either report it to either to the BBC or to the police locally or anywhere in North Wales, I'd be more than grateful.
Well, the detective looking for Myfanwy Jones, and indeed for Peggy Goodman, is Chief Inspector John Cook. Do you actually link the two? Do you think that the two women went missing for similar reasons?
No, we don't. From the inquiries we've conducted, both into Mrs. Goodman's background and Mrs. Jones's background, we don't feel that they are connected.
Looking at the Myfanwy Jones disappearance, just remind ourselves of the geography. Corwin, of course, not far from Llandar. Let's take a closer look at that. And we can see the bungalow, her friend's bungalow, which she left at 4:20, wasn't it?
4:20, that's correct.
And she was seen by the woman at the bus stop walking down to where the Vauxhall Viva was. And that's the man by the blue Viva. What description do we have of him?
He's described by our witness as being a middle-aged man, approximately 45 years of age, medium build, with dark collar-length hair, sideburns, and wearing what we believe to be a sheepskin coat.
He might, of course, have absolutely nothing to do with her disappearance.
Oh, absolutely. It's a matter, really, of eliminating from our inquiries, tracing him and eliminating him.
OK. She then walks further down the road towards Corwin, and I think the last sighting of her was about 4:35. We said that was the red car going the other direction, wasn't it?
That's correct, yes.
And then she... Well, we don't know what happened then. The hat was found here just after the junction down to Corwin. Now, you've brought that hat with you.
Yes, I have. It's a deerstalker hat, well used, well worn, but in good condition. As you can see, it's a herringbone pattern. On the inside label, it has the name Palatine, and we're very anxious to trace the owner of this hat, because he, just like the driver of the Vauxhall Viva, would have been at the scene at the time Mrs. Jones was last seen.
Right, and they might have seen something, or they might have been a witness, even though they don't recognise it.
That's correct, yes.
OK. Now, then there was the couple on the bridge, of course. They were seen to be arguing. What do we know about that couple?
All we know is that they were in possession of a dark, small-type van, that they were a middle-aged couple again, that the female was wearing clothing, light clothing.
Was she Myfanwy?
It's possible, but extremely doubtful, bearing in mind that incident was approximately 25 minutes after Mrs. Jones's last sighting.
Very briefly, is there any other appeal that you'd like to make to viewers in this case?
Yes, I would. I would like to anybody who saw Mrs. Jones that afternoon to come forward and to contact us this evening.
All right, John Cook, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
If you can help, the number, 811-8055, as always, 811-8055, or you can ring North Wales Police Direct. Here's their number at Wrexham, 353-111. That's 0978 for Wrexham, 353-111.
Just before Christmas, a wealthy farmer, Richard Thomas, and his sister Helen, both in their 50s, were found dead in their blazing house near Milford Haven. Viewers in Wales will probably remember the first reports in the news.
Radio Wales News at 7 o'clock with Delaney Roberts on Monday, December the 23rd. Police are investigating a mystery fire at a lonely country mansion in West Wales. The Paris police have set up an incident room nearby as part of their investigations into the fire and the deaths of 58-year-old Richard James Thomas and his 52-year-old sister Helen.
Originally, police suspected it was a case of murder and suicide, but after sifting through the rubble, they've changed their minds and believe an outsider is responsible.
Four months later, the ruin of Scoverston Park has given police few clues to go on. Whoever set fire to the house had a clear motive to destroy the evidence of a double murder. The precise motive for the murder, however, is still a mystery which only the lives of the victims might possibly explain. Richard and his sister Helen were both very shy and secretive people. They had few friends, although they were well known and well liked locally. Richard was a familiar figure at the local markets. He was known as a shrewd buyer and seller of cattle and was well respected in farming circles. His sister Helen had spent much of her life caring for her aging mother. Devoutly religious, she used to translate books into Braille. Scoverston Park had been the family home since the 20s. Helen and Richard were brought up there. Richard's ambition had been to be a scientist, but when his father died, he felt obliged to go into farming. Although between them they owned over 600 acres of land and 5 farms, Richard was almost miserly about spending money, and the estate was run down and badly in need of repair. Even his car was on the point of collapse. But there was another side to Richard which has emerged since his death. Police now know he frequently visited the local Palace cinema in Haverfordwest, particularly when late-night X-rated films were being shown.
2 tickets, please.
£2, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
One,
please.
We also know that on the last 2 occasions, Richard met a fat, bearded man and sat with him throughout the film. No one knows who that man was. It's the morning of the last Sunday before Christmas. 2 loggers were working in the grounds of Scoverston Park. Richard spoke to them at about 9:30.
David, I'm a bit worried about an elm that's dead. I wonder if you could have a look at it.
While Richard worked on the farm, Helen was at church in Stainton, a mile away. She always went to morning service, and friends say she seemed her usual self that day. Richard and Helen always had their lunch at exactly 12:30.
More gravy?
Okay.
At 1:30, the last definite sighting of Richard. He was seen on the Sentry Cross roundabout, heading in the direction of Neyland. What happened next is not known, but witness statements and forensic evidence provide a theory. A resident of Honeyborough Green in Neyland remembers a number of occasions when Richard parked his car outside her house. After a few minutes, a blue Land Rover would arrive to pick up Richard. Police believe the driver was probably Richard's lover. We don't know this happened on that day, but forensic evidence has revealed that Richard did have sex with another man that afternoon. There
witness recalls, they'd usually be gone a couple of hours. The last sighting of Helen Thomas was at 3:30 as she was leaving one of her farms. As far as we know, she drove straight home, and she would have arrived at around 3:45. Exactly what went on inside Scoveston Park that afternoon and evening isn't known, but several cars and people were seen outside near the path leading to the house. At 4:15, a yellow car similar to a Chevette was parked across the entrance to Scoveston Park, and the driver appeared to be leaning out of the passenger door. On the same stretch of road, a blue Cortina and a blue Land Rover was seen at 4:30 and again at 7:10. And at 5:30, a bearded man was seen staring intently at Scoveston. At 9 o'clock, Helen took a call from one of their tenants.
5642, hello.
Hello, Helen. David, Scoveston Grove here.
Oh, hello, David. What can I do for you?
Is Richard in?
No, I'm afraid he's out just now, but I don't think he'll be very long.
To the caller, Helen sounded quite normal, but it was the last known contact with either of the Thomases. Within an hour, Helen was dead. She was shot, probably in her bedroom, and it was in that room at about 10 o'clock that the fire was started. At 10:10, Andrew Main, a gas engineer, was driving home about a mile from Scoveston. As he drove, a Land Rover came towards him at speed and on the wrong side of the road. He tried to get the number, but it was too dark. The fire brigade were called at 11:29. They arrived within minutes. The body was Richard Thomas. He died of shotgun wounds to the stomach and the head. It took firemen 5 hours to totally extinguish the blaze. Scoveston Park was gutted. Helen's body was discovered the following morning. Well, Chief Superintendent David Davis is in charge of the case. What theories are you working on, and what is your most urgent appeal?
Well, at this stage of the inquiry, the most urgent appeal, without doubt, is we know that Mr. Thomas had sexual connection with another person during the course of the afternoon. And, of course, we know that Mr. Thomas was last seen alive at 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon, so the events of the afternoon are very important indeed. I'm making a very serious and a very sincere appeal to this person who had this sexual connection to come forward to see us. It doesn't matter what walk of life he might belong to or whatever, but we are very anxious to see him. And of course, in the same vein, if anybody else in the area knows of any of Mr. Thomas's homosexual friends or whatever.
Just to eliminate them from their
That's
inquiries.
right, yes.
Could we have your description of the fat bearded man who was seen with Mr. Thomas in the cinema in Haverfordwest?
Yes, the fat bearded man, of course, as we saw earlier on, we are told he's a man of about 20 stone in weight, a very large man, very fat legs, and apparently walking with his feet inclined to be turning out. So he shouldn't be too difficult to really find.
Now, if we can just look at the area on our micromap there, there's Sentry Cross roundabout there, where Richard was last seen heading towards Neyland. There's the Land Rover, which was seen on the Sunday evening about 10 o'clock, driving at speed on the wrong side of the road. And there was the entrance to Scoveston Park, where there were several cars and people seen that night, none of whom have come forward yet, have they?
That's right. No, they have not come forward. We're very interested in having a word with these people, the driver of the Land Rover, the Ford Cortina motor car, and of course, in addition, and of course, the yellow car that was parked at the entrance to Scoveston Park, and a man with a beard, equally important to see and interview. And in addition, of course, there were two people between 6 and 7 o'clock seen walking between Sentry Cross roundabout and the village of Stainton, walking in that direction. And of course, they are equally important to be interviewed by us as well, because their contribution to the inquiry could be of some value. There was a man with a dog seen about 9 o'clock that evening.
That was quite a crucial time, wasn't it?
Indeed, very important time, because we know, as we saw on the film, that Miss Thomas spoke to Mr. Nicholas at 9 o'clock, and of course the fire was ablaze. The house was ablaze at 10 o'clock at night. This gentleman walking with a stag hound, he might have been a poacher, but we're not too interested in people poaching at this stage of the game. We'd like to see him, and we are asking him to come and see us.
Again, in absolute confidence.
Absolutely.
Do you think anybody else could have seen Richard driving his old Red Rover sometime after 1:30, after the sighting on the red Sentry Cross roundabout?
Well, indeed. I'm very happy with the sighting at 1:30. He was driving along the road at that time, but indeed there are many gaps, a complete gap in his case, of course, after that time. And we are asking for sightings, if anyone has seen that car at any place, anywhere during the course of the afternoon, and indeed above that as well, if they've remember seeing the car anywhere else, even before that day, we're equally anxious to speak to them.
Right, Mr. Davies, thank you very much indeed. There is incidentally a very large reward for any information that could lead to some information that can help the police. It's £25,000. Now, if anything has jogged your memory and all that, remember it was the Sunday just 3 days before Christmas. Please do ring us here in the studio. The number, as always, 01811 8055, or direct to police in Haverfordwest. That's 0437 3355. 0437, the code for Haverfordwest, 3355.
Lynette White. Lynette was 20. She lived with and helped to support a boyfriend and was hoping to settle down with him and have children. Instead, on Valentine's Day, Lynette was murdered. This is Cardiff's Docklands, Tiger Bay.
Good morning all and welcome to Wednesday Street Life. Border Day Chigid, Frank Hennessy Summer. I'm with you until 12:30. And we're on a bit of a crusade today.
Welcome back to Meet for Lunch and to our phone-in on Women at Work and the extent of
Red Dragon News. This is Martin Shankelman.
Lynette was a practical girl striving to make a living for herself after a troubled childhood. At the age of 18, she turned to prostitution. Every night, 7 nights a week, she'd work here from 6 p.m. till 1 a.m., often taking clients to a flat in James Street. When she stopped work early in the morning, she went regularly to meet friends at a nearby club.
You're always stealing my cigarettes.
Oh, come on,
no,
there's plenty.
I've only got
Come on,
7
there's
left.
plenty behind the bar. Now,
This is the last one.
Well, I only knew Lynette from the club, but more of a friend in the taxi driver, you know, as the time went on, like. She used to talk a lot and dream a lot and, you know, like any other young girl, like, you know. But herself, she was a cracking girl, and I used to think a lot of her, like, you know.
Hey, Jack, I see you back.
Hey, Jack.
Look at the state of you.
Head on you.
On Tuesday afternoon, Lynette left her flat in Grangetown, and for 5 days, she disappeared. She was seen around the city, but she avoided her closest friends. This chemist shop is just around the corner from Lynette's flat, and she came here every Saturday to buy supplies of condoms. Lynette walked in as usual on Saturday the 13th, her 5th day away from home. Later on that evening, an old school friend saw Lynette standing outside a disco known as Monty's.
Really? That's why I'm looking for my father. Have you seen him? No. You come in. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay.
Lynette almost certainly was not waiting for her father. She hadn't seen him in a year. It's not known if she did meet someone here or left alone, but she stayed here till sometime after 1 a.m. By now, it's Sunday. It's February the 14th, Valentine's Day. That afternoon, a woman walking down James Street noticed a man who was standing in a doorway. He appeared to have blood on his hands. This is next door to where Lynette took clients. The witness walked past the Maritime Museum and stood looking out to sea when she felt someone sit down beside her. It was the man from James Street. At 8:45 that Sunday evening, Lynette's best friend went round to check the James Street flat. She was worried by Lynette's disappearance. When she saw a door locked shut that was normally open, she called the police.
Charlie Quebec 07, I need a console very urgently over. Yes, from Charlie Quebec 07, I'm at number 7 James Street. I've just broken in and found the dead body of a woman inside, and it appears to be a suspicious death.
Charlie Quebec 07, Roger, that's Milton Wilco 07, come to 1 out.
Could you inform the inspector and the CID to attend, and also get the police surgeon out, over?
John Williams calling it a suspicious death turned out to be the understatement of the year. It was the most appalling attack on her. She had been stabbed, I think, was it over 50 times and had her throat cut. Terrible
Indeed,
attack.
that is so. It was a very cruel, vicious and violent murder after what is a young girl.
Now, the man seen virtually outside the flat that she used to take clients to must be the prime suspect. A man who was mumbling, incoherent. I gather he was crying at times too, blood on his hands.
That is right. He certainly is a person who we must speak to at this time.
Would other people have seen him, and if so, how would they have noticed him? We've compiled a Crimewatch video feed. What are the distinctive features?
He is very distinctive. He's got dark brown, greasy hair with lightning towards the front of it. He's about 35 to 40 years of age and between 5'8" and 6 foot tall. And we must remember that this man was bleeding himself. He's cut himself. He's also got blood on him from the deceased. He's upset. He's crying, and he's in a bit of a state.
And presumably might have sought medical attention himself.
Well,
if he'd cut
indeed,
himself.
that is so.
Why had she left her flat for 5 days, do you know?
Well,
Where was she?
she's had a bit of a tiff with her boyfriend, and I think she's had problems with going to court to give evidence. She is a local girl. She would have stayed somewhere in the area. There is no doubt that someone out there knows where she stayed, and we would like those persons to come forward and speak to us.
To eliminate them, obviously.
That is so, yes.
Everybody seems to speak terribly highly of this girl. She was tremendously liked and admired, and I gather even a large number of her clients have come forward who went to her as she was a prostitute.
Yes, of course she was, but she was a popular girl, she was a quiet girl, she was well liked. But there are other clients in the city and outside the city who ought to come forward and tell us when they've been with her so that we can eliminate them from the inquiry.
Well, Lynette's family and close friends have put up a reward of £1,000. Here's the number. 018118055. That's 018118055. Or you can call the incident room in Cardiff. That's on 0222 398 381. 0222, the code for Cardiff, 398 381. This is John Lee from the BBC programme See Here, who's going to help us with our first appeal this month. But that's because our first case is about the last days of a 20-year-old from South Wales, Susanne Greenhill, who was profoundly deaf. In other words, so deaf that she heard no sounds at all and couldn't speak. Now that's why we're making special efforts to communicate with deaf people throughout this sequence. They may be especially well placed to help with this inquiry. So, as well as the normal Crimewatch subtitles on CFAX, we'll have signing and extra captions too. Susanne was engaged to be married. Her fiancé, Tony Wesson, was also deaf, and she saw him almost every night. But she was fiercely independent and lived on her own in a rented flat. Our reconstruction begins on Friday evening, the 1st of July, in Newport, in Gwent. Tony Wesson was surprised to find Susanne's curtains had been drawn. It was only 6 p.m.
What's the matter?
Yeah, I'm going.
Susanna.
How?
Susanne had been raped and stabbed repeatedly in her neck and back. Forensic scientists and detectives experienced at scenes of crime described this as one of the most upsetting they'd ever had to deal with. Susanne had lived here for 2 years and took great pride in the flat's appearance. Her life was sometimes lonely. She was isolated by her disability and shunned by some who found her deafness made them feel uncomfortable. She'd been born deaf and from an early age attended special schools. She remained close to her family and visited her parents and grandparents regularly. Susanne went every Tuesday to the Deaf Club at Lady Hill Centre, but she seemed happiest with her fiancé. Several times a week, they went to the Newport Leisure Centre. Swimming was one of Susanne's favourite pastimes. And Tony had persuaded her to join him weight training. She also joined him in another hobby. He's keen on model making, especially motorbikes.
Good.
Friends remarked on how happy Susanne seemed when she and Tony were together. Susanne was very fashion conscious, and a week before her death, she experimented with a different hair colour. She turned from blonde to henna chestnut.
As far as the forensic evidence is concerned, across Susanne's eyes was tape, and we know that this tape is the Fast Aid zinc oxide 5 centimetre in width.
A roll of that tape was sold at Wilcox Chemist in Malpas Road that week to a man with a plaster cast on his right arm. Detectives need to find that man to eliminate him from their inquiries.
£1.80, £2.
Another roll was sold at Watkins Davis Chemist at Bettis Centre to a man who wanted just a short length cut from a roll.
And you haven't got anything less on the tape here? Oh, well. I'll have it then.
Aye.
Yep, I'll do.
The other piece of vital information we've had from the flat is a footmark. And this mark was definitely made by a person who was there at the time that Susanne was killed. The mark is of a foot, approximately 4.5 to 5 in size, and this would give us an average height size of 5'1", certainly no more than 5'3". It is possibly, and say possibly, an adolescent. And this footmark was found in the flat in blood.
Police have tried to piece together two elements of Susanne's life: who she knew and where she'd been the day she died. Some of her acquaintances have not yet been traced, and there's one man in particular detectives need to hear from. He was seen with her several times, at Sainsbury's, where he accompanied her shopping, at Newport bus station, where he went with her towards her home, and at Maysglass Industrial Estate.
Could I have a hot dog, please? With onions, sir? Do you want onions? Yes, please.
If this is you, or you know who this is, please call us now. This is all that's known of Susanne's last day. Between 9 and 10 o'clock, she met a friend and helped her with her shopping. She was also seen at Littlewoods in Newport Shopping Precinct. She came here often for morning tea and toast. At roughly 10 to 5, she was seen taking shopping home from Sainsbury's. And at 5:30, she was seen in Goodrich Lane.
darling.
Not knowing she was deaf, they thought her rather snooty. But then they saw her go to a garage, perhaps looking for her fiancé, and finding it locked, they saw her lose her temper. What happened after that is still a mystery. Well, Glenn, we've seen from the reconstruction clearly most of what you need to hear. Is there anything else?
Yes, Nick, there is. In fact, we have a new sighting of Susanne. This is a sighting on the 27th of June. That's 2 days prior to her death. On that day, she was seen coming from the entrance to Shaftesbury Park, where a fair was being erected.
That's what, a couple hundred yards from her home?
It is indeed. This would have been about 8:30, 8:45. She was wearing very distinctive clothing. In fact, it's what's described as a hot pants suit, which was either pink or pinky orange. I would have thought that with clothing like that, somebody in the fair would have seen her. And we're asking anybody at the fair who saw her, and in particular anybody who saw her talking to any male person at the fair, to contact us.
As it happens, there's another link with that fun fair. In fact, two separate sightings that could point to the same man who might be the killer or might need to be eliminated. At around midnight, in fact, on Wednesday the 29th of June, the day that Susanne died, this travelling fair was still setting up, due to open, in fact, the next day. And workers were surprised to see a car drive into the park at speed and later drive away down Evans Street. A couple of hours later, another witness remembers seeing a man in a blue checked shirt walking along the junction of Evans Street and Shaftesbury Street. He got into a dark-coloured Mark III Ford Escort and did a fast three-point turn. And the witness remembers that the car had a tow bar and the registration number began, they think, A59. Obviously, you've got to eliminate whoever was driving that car, whoever was walking there. Anyone else you need to eliminate?
Yes, that is correct. We're very anxious to trace the driver of that car. We're also anxious to trace a man who came into our inquiry very early on. This man went into a fish and chip shop in Cross Keys. He had blood on both his arms. He appeared to be intoxicated but didn't smell of drink. This man, we are very anxious to trace.
We've got a video fit of him. Describe him for us, will you?
Yes, he was 6 foot in height. He had mousy brown curly hair. He's described as very, very slim and age between 20 and 25 years.
You've had a lot of help, I know, from the local community and from the deaf community generally.
We have. The deaf community and the neighbours of Susanne have been particularly patient with us and very helpful. But we are sure, absolutely positive in fact, that there is more vital evidence out there. And we would appeal to anybody who has any evidence, however small it may appear to them. It could be vital in our inquiry to bring Susanne's brutal killer to justice.
If you knew Susanne any time in the last couple of years, do call us 811 8055. And we've a separate number for the deaf or hard of hearing. That's 01811 1066. And it's equipped with Minicom phones, which allow callers to type and read their messages. Now, that's only for the deaf who have Minicom or Vistel phones. The number 01811 1066. Or you can call the Main D police station direct. That's using ordinary phones on 0633 244 999. That's 0633, the code for Newport, 244 999. Reconstructions is a case that made the headlines. The disappearance of those two walkers, Peter and Gwenda Dixon, on a cliff-top path in Pembrokeshire. It happened at the end of June, a time when thousands of tourists were in southwest Wales. Many of those holidaymakers have since returned to the area to help police with the inquiry. Now, some of them have helped to make a Crimewatch reconstruction. It begins at a campsite where the couple had been staying.
Hello, Harrelson Farm.
Hello, is that Miss Davis?
Yes.
It's Tim Dixon here. I'm concerned about my parents. They were due back this weekend, and in fact they were due back at work today, but they haven't turned up yet. Are they still at the campsite?
Well, the tent's still here, and your father's car, but I haven't seen them for a few days.
Something's not right here. They wouldn't just leave the car in the tent. I think you'd better ring the police. Could you contact me after you've done that?
By now, it was 4 days since Peter and Gwenda Dixon had been seen here at Halston Farm campsite. The Dixons' holiday had begun 2 weeks earlier, on Monday, June the 19th, when they arrived here from their home in Oxfordshire.
£24.50. It's even cheaper than last year.
Well, you are earlier this year, and we are cheaper in June. Thank you.
We'll probably stay a second week if the weather holds. It was so good this year, we decided to come away before it changed.
Well, if you decide to stay, you can settle before you leave. I hope it stays fine for you.
They'd been visiting this site for 16 years, and so they knew the area well. Both Peter and Gwenda Dixon were very fit. They enjoyed walking and loved the Pembrokeshire countryside. They'd been happily married for 27 years and had 2 children. One of them, their son Tim, joined them on holiday for a couple of days.
And a jumper and a life jacket when you want it.
CQ, 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 Golf Whiskey Zero, Hotel Foxtrot, Quebec Mobile, Golf Whiskey
Peter
Zero,
was a keen radio ham and often spent hours on end contacting other enthusiasts. If you heard his call sign or if you spoke to him by radio at the end of June, please call us now.
Foxtrot, Quebec Mobile, Golf Whiskey Zero, Hotel Foxtrot, Quebec Mobile. Does anybody read?
The village of Marlows is about 5 miles from the campsite. It's the day before the Dixons' disappearance. At about 9 a.m, 2 men were noticed walking away from the post office. Later, the same witness saw the same 2 men about 2 miles from the campsite at St Bride's Crossroads. Do you know who they were? The Dixons were also in Marlows that morning. They asked a farmer if they could drive across his land towards Dale Airfield.
Oh, yes, this is for the radio telephone, and these 2 are for my radio receivers. You get quite good range from high spots, like the airfield.
Oh, yes. Is that why you're going up there now?
No, as a matter of fact, I'm going to see a friend I contacted on the radio. Turns out he's holidaying in the area, too. Thanks.
Dale Airfield is abandoned, an old wartime base perched above the sea, but popular with tourists because of its cliff-top views. Did you see the Dixons here that morning? Did you meet them? Or did you hear Peter Dixon transmitting on his radio? Next day, the day they disappeared, breakfast time on Thursday, June the 29th. And though it's a fine morning, the weather had worsened, and the previous night it had rained heavily. About a quarter of a mile from the campsite at Hasgard, Susan Beddoes was taking her children to school. 2 cyclists caught her attention.
Do we go Tolbenny way or the Havens? Tolbenny.
It seemed they were heading towards the coastal path via the village of Tolbenny. Dispirited by the erratic weather, Richard Lynes, who was camped next to the Dixons, was packing up to leave.
Morning. How are you this morning? Oh, a bit fed up with this weather. We've decided to go home today. Yes, we've had enough too. What time are you off then? About midday. We're going for a walk along the coastal path first, towards Dale. Give the tent time to dry out. Oh, must be off.
Richard Lynes was the last known person to have a conversation with the Dixons. Campers remember seeing the couple set off for their walk at about 9:30. From here, there are no known witnesses. But if the Dixons did take the coastal path towards Dale, this is the way they would have come. Just before 11, Richard Lynes and his wife left the site. They were the only people that knew the Dixons were planning to return home that day, so no one was alarmed when the couple failed to return. Shots were heard at about 11 o'clock, but in a farming area like this, gunshots are not unusual. In Pembroke, at 1:30 that afternoon, someone used Peter Dixon's cash card at the NatWest Bank in Main Street. Whoever it was knew the correct PIN number, but was not familiar with a cash dispenser. He asked for £37, a sum not recognised by the machine. Almost immediately, he corrected his mistake and withdrew £10. Meanwhile, at 2 that afternoon, a family was walking along the coastal path close to Tolbenny Church. They remembered the man because his behaviour was so peculiar. 4 p.m. back in Pembroke, and the cyclist was using Peter Dixon's card again. This time he withdrew £100. A few doors down from the bank is the John Bull store. Someone spent £40 here on a new pair of walking shoes. It's 3 o'clock the next day, Friday the 30th of June, in King Street, Carmarthen. A different man was seen in the vicinity at about the time that Peter Dixon's cash card was used again. There was a blue Ford Sierra parked close by. And 1 day later, on Saturday the 1st of July, Nicholas Elliott was driving through Haverfordwest on his way to work when, at 7:15 a.m, he passed the NatWest Bank in the High Street. From this sighting, police made this artist's impression. Police believe that same cyclist was still in Haverfordwest some 4 hours later in the Whole Food restaurant in Key Street. For 2 days, the RAF, police, coastguards and National Park wardens searched along the coastal footpath, suspecting that the Dixons had fallen from a cliff. What they found was worse than they had feared. Just after 3 p.m. on Wednesday the 5th of July, a police dog discovered their bodies at the edge of the cliff top, carefully hidden by branches. Gwenda and Peter Dixon had been killed with a 12-bore shotgun. Clive Jones, whoever was using the cash card is obviously critical to this case. Crimewatch has been able to enhance the original artist's impression. What do we know about this man?
Well, there is no doubt at all that he is the person that we need to identify and is the person who cashed Mr. Dixon's cash card. I feel that one of the persons who can help us with this and can certainly help us identify him is the fair-haired youth from Marlos, who was in his company the morning before the murders, which we saw in the reconstruction earlier. He's obviously on a hiking holiday in the area, walking, and split up from the cyclist shortly after going through Marlois. I appeal to him, if he is watching, please ring us.
Now, there were a lot of holidaymakers in the area at that time. I think you've worked out about 1,200 so far. Presumably the ones you need to talk to most critically are those who were on the cliff-top path on that 29th of June.
Yes, indeed, and we're aware that there were 76 persons who walked that wooded area of the coastal path between the morning and early afternoon. We've traced 40 of these, so there are still 36 people we need to speak to who went through the area. Particularly, there are 2 males who came over a stile at Barrowhead at about 10 a.m. One is aged about 50, the other 30. They were casually dressed and they walked into the wooded area and should have seen or met up with Mr. and Mrs. Dixon.
Okay, but if anyone was in the area around this time at the very end of June, you need to hear from them.
Yes, absolutely.
What about the campsite? I mean, at Halston, I know Miss Davis didn't keep names and addresses of everyone. Why should she? So you haven't been able to trace everyone who was there at the time the Dixons were?
No, there are 2 caravans in particular that we can't trace the occupants of. Number 45, which was occupied by 4 adults and a child, and a red car and a touring caravan, which was occupied by 2 fair-haired males with short hair who were extremely fit and could have been from the army.
And if anyone had tents there as well and hasn't yet contacted the police or been contacted by you, you want to hear from them as well?
Yes, indeed, yes.
Now, tell us about this. I know these are replicas of what's missing from Mr. Dixon.
Yes, Mr. Dixon's brown fold-over wallet was stolen, similar to this. It contained 7 credit cards, a telephone charge card and his driving licence. These make up an unusual array of credit cards, and some of them, particularly the Trust House 40 Gold card, is not something that a large number of people would carry.
OK. Well, as I say, it might be quite difficult to remember what you were doing on the 29th of June, but you'll know if you were on holiday in this area, and if you were on that coastal path in particular, or if you were at that campsite around that time, please contact us. If you think there's anything that you can add in any way, Here's the number, 01811 Mr. Jones and his team are here. If you prefer, you can ask to speak to a BBC researcher. Other members of the team are standing by at the incident room in Carmarthen, and the number there is 0267 235 101. That's 0267, the code for Carmarthen, 235 101. That's over 8 years old, but that only came to light 8 weeks ago. What we're about to show you is nothing of the crime itself, but of the painstaking investigation that went into identifying the victim. The process led to a whole new set of questions, and hence to this appeal. Our film begins in Cardiff on the 7th of December at a house that's under renovation. Wrapped in polythene and a roll of carpet was what looked like a human skeleton. When the police had checked out the finding, a major inquiry was launched. Within days, 80 officers had been brought in on the case, led by Detective Chief Superintendent John Williams.
We faced a dilemma at this time, having only the skeletal remains with nothing else whatsoever. We first of all sent it to an odontologist, a Dr. Whitaker of Cardiff.
Once one's presented with the specimen, it's important to try to get information from it without damaging it initially. And so we usually use X-rays or take a radiograph like this. You can see here that inside the jawbones, and in the top jaw here as well, there are a large number of teeth that haven't yet come through into the mouth. And you can see that they are still undergoing development. And we know how long it takes for that kind of root to grow, so it's obvious that from that information we could work out exactly how old this individual was when they died.
He was able to tell us that the body was that of a female, probably aged between 14 to 17 years of age, and indeed he was able further to tell us that it was probably of a young girl aged about 15.5 to 16 years of age.
It wasn't much to go on, but the police now knew not just the victim's age, but height, sex, and approximate date of death. At the incident room in Norbury Road in Cardiff, a search was made of missing persons files, and they began the laborious task of tracing everyone who'd lived in any of the dozen bedsits at 27 and 29 Fitzhamon Embankment, where the body had been found.
We then consulted Richard Neve, a medical illustrator from Manchester University. We sent him the skull, and from that he was able to build up for us a facial impression from the skeleton.
Using models, Richard Neve explains how the victim's face was recreated.
The first thing to do is, of course, to prepare the skull so that the face can be built on it. Next stage is to take the plaster skull and then to mark 21 points over the face, and these are the sites from which measurements have been taken of soft tissue thickness. And holes are drilled in here and pegs inserted, and the pegs represent the average thickness of soft tissue to be found on the human face at these particular sites. So that means that when the face is built over the skull, it is not just a matter of imagination, it is done quite deliberately.
This turned out to be a striking likeness. You may not have known this girl by name, but do you recall her from the early 1980s? This picture was issued nationwide and made front pages in South Wales.
Oh, hello. I think I recognise the girl in the picture.
Hello, I'm telephoning about the photograph of the girl in the paper.
As a result of a massive publicity campaign, 2 social workers rang the incident room at Cardiff and gave us the name of the person that they thought resembled the impression. We were then able to get dental records, which we took to the odontologist, and as a result of that, we were able to identify the remains in the carpet as that of the girl, Karen Price, from Cardiff.
Karen was 15 when this photograph was taken, a few months before she disappeared. She'd been in care since she was 10, but in July 1981, she absconded from the Mysa Eglise Assessment Centre in Pontypridd. Very little is known about what happened to her from then on, but she was known to hang around the bus station at Wood Street, opposite Cardiff Central Railway Station. Detectives are very anxious for any help they can get from anyone who knew Karen or thinks they might have met her. This is Big Astley's Cafe, just in front of the bus station. Did you eat here in the summer of 1981? When Karen had run away from homes before, and she'd done so several times, she often came here for a coffee. And in the early 80s, lots of youngsters used to hang around outside the Empire Pool in Wood Street. Do you remember Karen? Above all, did you live opposite Cardiff Arms Park across the Taff, at Bedsits in Fitzhamon Embankment? Detectives are determined to find everyone who lived here in the late 70s or early 80s, especially if you stayed in numbers 27 or 29. John Williams, there'll be people already reaching for the phones, I'm sure, and I suspect there'll be others who are hesitating, a bit worried that if they ring in, they're going to catapult themselves into the middle of a murder inquiry, might even be regarded as suspects.
No, I would like to reassure these people that they would be purely treated as friendly witnesses. We are appealing for information from them, so please come forward.
Now, there must have been a lot of people who knew Karen after she left Mysa Eglise, the assessment centre, in July 1981. I mean, where did she sleep? Where did she eat? Where did she wash?
That's quite right. She was in and around that city centre area, and someone must have befriended her and certainly seen her, and I would ask these people now, even after 8 years, when they may have moved away from Cardiff, to come forward and contact us.
If anybody befriended her, it might be a real friend now, and ring in. This is the sort of clothes you think she was wearing, a sort of grey sweatshirt, and these are very distinctive. These jeans, distinctive really, they're called Carmen Gear. They're out of production now, aren't they? But it's the colour,
really.
That's
quite right, yes. They're plum coloured, and there's, without a doubt, she was wearing those at the time of her death.
That house again, 2729 Fitzhamon Embankment, which is the place where she was found and where you suspect she might have been staying. You don't know, but we need to know anyone else who was staying there. And here's the number, 01811 8055. The time, remember, we're talking about is summer and late summer 1981 in particular. 01811 8055. Or you can call the incident room in Cardiff on 0222 398 381. That's 0222, the code for Cardiff, 398 381. Our next case is one of those crimes that's as frightening as an Alfred Hitchcock film. The murder of a young woman in the dark just a few yards from her home. The depiction of this sort of crime in fiction gives the impression it's quite common and makes many women scared. In fact, this sort of offence is rare, but tends to make big headlines. You won't find our reconstruction frightening, only rather sad, but maybe it will induce people to call us with information. Geraldine Palk lived with her mum and dad in Cardiff. A few days before Christmas, approaching her own doorstep, she was stabbed repeatedly, raped and dumped in a nearby stream. Her family and friends, together with several witnesses, have taken part in this reconstruction of the last hours of her life. It's the night of Friday, the 21st of December, the Friday before Christmas, and Cardiff city centre was crowded with partygoers. Like so many others that night, Geraldine was on an office outing with some colleagues from Celtic Shipping, where she'd worked for the past 2 years. They arrived at the Bank Wine Bar at about 10 to 6.
Yeah, girls, your Christmas bonus. Make the most of it.
What are you going to wear to the party tomorrow night? You're going to wear that black dress, you know, the black velvet one. What are you going to wear? I don't know, I think I might wear that black cosmic velvet one I've got. Oh, yes, I know. You've got to be careful when you dance, you don't fall out of that one. Oh, it's with these.
She didn't have any enemies. She'd, as I say, speak to anyone. She lived life. She lived it to the fullest. Very, very outgoing. And that was Geraldine, a very loving girl towards her family. Her niece and nephew, you know, mum and dad and myself, very, very close. She was a bridesmaid in her favourite colour, which was what I wanted, because it suited her red. I mean, that was her favourite colour. And that's why I chose those colours for my wedding. She would have lived to have got married. Yeah. She would have made a good mother.
At about 11:40, Geraldine and a couple of her friends arrived at Jackson's nightclub in Westgate Street.
I'm just going to the toilet. Don't move from here. Okay, wait here.
Geraldine never returned. But then, at about 20 past midnight, she joined a taxi queue just across the street from Jackson's nightclub, outside Castle Cabs.
Hiya, Jack. Oh, hiya. Where have you been? Oh, the bank, wine press, and then Jackson's. Who have you been with? Oh, some of my mates from work. You on your own? Yeah, I'm knackered. I've been out all day. I'm going home. Yeah, me too. Here's my taxi. See you then. Yeah, bye then. Have a nice Christmas. Yeah, you do.
By 12:45, Geraldine had got a cab herself and was sharing it towards Fairwater. She asked to be dropped off about 250 yards from her house, perhaps to save the taxi having to turn round in the estate.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas then.
Either she walked along Waterhall Road or took a shortcut across school playing fields. But just 20 yards from her door...
Stop! I was driving down Waterhall Road at about 1:10 in the morning, and I was taking my babysitter home. As I approached Bracken Place, I thought what was a lover's tiff. He just had his hands on her shoulders and was shaking her, and as I carried on down Waterhall Road, there was a girl and two boys walking down past the school. They were only 20 or 30 yards away from the argument when I saw them. The three people must have walked past the couple that were arguing just seconds before I drove past them.
A few minutes later, screams were heard by people in nearby houses. And about half an hour later, in the same area, a couple saw a man running from the direction of the school playing fields, where Geraldine's body was found next day. The man flagged down a taxi, which turned round a little further on in Bracken Place and came back to pick him up. They drove off towards Cardiff city centre.
I had a feeling then there was something wrong because Geraldine hadn't come home from the night before, and it wasn't like her not to telephone or whatever to tell us. And then I had to go down to Cardiff Royal Infirmary to actually identify her. My parents just can't speak to anyone. They're absolutely devastated. They just can't believe that something has happened like this to Geraldine. And we're convinced that there's someone out there, somewhere, knows something about this. And if they're keeping it to themselves, well, that'll be on their conscience for as long as they live. But that's all they need to do is pick the phone up, phone me or the police. It's only the information we're after. We're not after their names or addresses. Just help us to catch this person.
Just a note of detail, there was snow there, as you saw. It was snowing during our reconstruction. It was not snowing on the Friday night before Christmas. Phil Jones, this attack was one of enormous ferocity.
Yes, it was. It was a brutal and sustained attack on a decent young woman who had got within yards of her home before being bundled into the middle of a playing fields opposite her home, raped, repeatedly beat about the head, and stabbed on over 80 occasions before being dragged about 130 yards to a brook near the Fairwater Leisure Centre.
What it means is that whoever did it would have been absolutely covered in blood.
Yes, he would have been. Very substantially bloodstained, and muck about his clothing and his footwear.
So someone went home early in the morning of that Saturday before Christmas with a lot of blood and muck on them?
Yes, he did.
3 witnesses we saw in Waterhall Road. Obviously you want those to come forward. That was late that Friday night, early this Saturday morning, who were walking past the arguing couple. Anyone else you want to find?
Yes, we've already spoken to a lot of people in that area at that time, but we're appealing for anyone else who was out in that area after 12:30 to come forward.
Anyone else you want to find?
Yes, we do. I am firmly of the opinion that Geraldine had formed an association with a man during the 10 days, or had an association with a man during the 10 days leading up to her death. She didn't confide in anyone about it. I've already appealed for that man to come forward, to date without success. I'll appeal again, and I'll ask anyone who may have any idea about his identity to come and speak to us.
Now that friend, or indeed other men you're appealing, or other witnesses you're appealing for who were leaving the area late that night, might have legitimate reasons for not wanting to come forward, at least non-criminal ones. They might have been with someone they shouldn't have been with. Are you going to reveal anything about their private life to the public?
What I'd say is this: I'm in the business of trying to detect a murder, nothing else.
So if they come, you'll treat any information they give you with absolute discretion?
Yes.
You found a key. It might not have been Geraldine's, but it might have been. Describe the key to us, can you?
Well, it wasn't Geraldine's. The key was found about 20 yards from the site of an attack upon her. It's a duplicate key cut from a blank with the word Ilko embossed on it. It's come from a lock which has been fitted to a double-glazed aluminium door, probably fitted to a shop or commercial premises, or even to a house. It could have been on a bottom, or fitted to a bottom rail lock on a shutter door, or even a padlock.
OK, well, if you know who lost that key, or indeed if you lost it, or think you did, please call us. Here's the number if you can help in any way: 081 811 8181, or you can call the CID in Cardiff. They're on 0222 398 381. That's 0222, the code for Cardiff, 398 381.
In charge of it describes as the most baffling he's ever tackled. In fact, apart from this teacup, there's almost nothing to go on. The cup, which hasn't yet been washed, as you can see, belonged to Harry and Meghan Tooze, who probably took it off the shelf in honour of an unexpected visitor. Was that you, or do you know who it might have been? What does seem clear is that someone who went to see them on their farm that Monday morning did not reciprocate their friendship.
Chiarywine Farm nestles between undulating hills near the village of Llanhari, midway between Cardiff and Bridgend.
Come on. Where are you, you little buggers? Come on. Come on. There.
You may have known Harry Tooze from his market garden business, though he retired some 7 years ago. But he was still proud of his cabbages, which he guarded jealously from rabbits with his new shotgun. His old one had been stolen about a year ago. Breakfast time on Monday, the 26th of July.
Was that all right, then?
Lovely, thank you, lovely.
This is quite a tangled web, isn't it? Perhaps you could remind us.
Have you finished your list yet?
Almost. That should last us for a few days. What sort of meat do you want?
I don't know. Bit of pork would be nice. Oh, what was that we had the other week? Lamb, was it?
Roast lamb.
Get that to me. Must get down to that cattle market again. It's time we had a few more head. Keep the place going like.
Well, I'm glad we got that hay in. That'll keep us going for a while.
Yeah, it will, that.
Harry and Meghan were both born in mid-Glamorgan, and their little farm had been in Meghan's family for a century and more. Their only daughter moved away 7 years ago, and life was uneventful.
Got your purse and everything, have you?
Yes, we won't be wanting very much, and we got our pension money.
Back at lunchtime, then.
What little's known about that fateful day is this. At 9:30 a.m, Harry and Meghan left the farm and drove up their narrow, churned-up track to fetch their pensions from the post office at Llanhari.
Morning.
How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Is your wife with you today?
Yes, just outside, Meg. Here you are, Meg. Fill your pockets with that lot.
Out of our pockets into Tesco's, more like. Not so busy in there this morning?
No, get you early enough, see?
Monday's always a busy day.
Anything in the paper, then?
No, nothing changes. World's still in a mess. Oh, that Ivy's coming back soon.
Who's that?
Ivy Brennan from Coronation.
Oh, that's rubbish. You're always on about that programme.
She's good, though. I like Ivy. I shouldn't be too long. I haven't got very much to get.
They'd shopped here almost every Monday for 15 years, and sometimes bumped into one of Harry's sisters.
Hello, Harry.
Oh, hello, love. How are you?
Oh, I'm all right. How are you feeling after your operation?
Oh, not bad. Still a bit sore, you know.
We met them at Tesco's and we had a little chat about the family. Meghan liked her chapel and Harry had been involved in the farmers because he was on a committee. They were a very quiet couple and they were a devoted couple.
According to a neighbour, by about 11, the couple were arriving back at the farm.
I was going to visit my sister. I seen Harry and Meghan Tooze's Land Rover. They then turned in over the cattle grid and then went towards their home.
Where do you want this from?
In the cupboard under there.
Local people had thought nothing of the 2 gunshots that Monday lunchtime. Maybe Harry had been out rabbiting again. But that evening, when their daughter's nightly phone call went unanswered, neighbours were alerted. Eventually, police were called, and Harry and Meghan were discovered in the cowshed, buried under hay. There were no signs of a robbery, and it seems likely they knew their killer. Do you think you know who it was? Or why someone might want them dead?
Harry and Meghan had been shot. That was a necessarily impressionistic account because, of course, so little is known about that day. And, as I said, this is really the best clue. You're pretty sure that this was taken down the shelf, from the shelf very, very rarely, and only when there was an important visitor.
That's correct. We can't rule out the fact that Mrs. Tooze herself may have drunk from the cup that morning. The indications are that she didn't.
But she never normally did?
No, her favourite mug was in the kitchen. Mr. Tooze's mug was on the table alongside that cup and saucer.
Now, let's get this clear. This could have been an entirely innocent visitor that morning who may be watching now and sort of horrified, saying, well, look, I just dropped in.
That's correct. It could have been, as you say, an innocent visitor, but we'd ask that person to come forward in order that we could eliminate him.
Now, what's the main point of your appeal? Because you have so little to go on. How can viewers help?
Well, they can help firstly by giving us any persons who they know who visit the farmhouse. It is important. we haven't come across all that many people that actually went to the farmhouse.
Do you need to know everybody who knew Harry and Meghan?
Very much so, yes. It would help to give us a background on Mr. and Mrs. Tooze, which obviously would be great assistance to us.
Now, what about anybody who's heard rumours, even vague? Are they any good to you, or do you need concrete evidence?
Yes, however vague these rumours may be, then we would like to hear them. As I say, despite extensive inquiries, no apparent motive has emerged as yet.
So anybody who's been talking about anything that could be connected to
anything
this?
at all, feud, grudge, whatever.
Now, I know you've also got to eliminate some cars and some people seen in the area on the day. Tell us about them and the area involved.
Yes, comparatively speaking, the farmhouse in question is in a somewhat isolated area, and I'm particularly keen for pedestrians or motorists that were in the Trecastle Lane or the old Llanharan Lane area to come forward.
Those are marked in orange on the map. Then remember, it's Monday, the 26th of July. Very briefly, this is a replica of the gun that was stolen from Harry about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago. Pretty distinctive. Now, obviously, whoever's stolen it is most unlikely to call in. Somebody might have repaired it, though, or know who's got it now.
Yes, it has some very unique features. Firstly, the underlever opener there at the bottom.
The stock is broken by this lever here.
In fact, there was string attached to the trigger mechanism, similar to this gun, in order to secure it in place.
And a bit of damage to this.
That's right.
Right hand here.
The right-hand hammer mechanism was damaged.
Short barrel, I know, 2 or 3 inches off the barrel, and it had, under here, this brass plate, it had initials.
Yes, initials BJ were on the underside of the stock.
Okay, well, if you have any information, whatever it is, do please call us here in the studio, 0500 600 600, or you can try the incident room in Cardiff. That's on 0222 398 381. That's 0222, the code for Cardiff, 398 381.
Takes us back 2 months to a cold Wednesday in mid-January, and it takes us to a suburb of Cardiff, St Mellons. Claire Hood, a 15-year-old, was murdered while truanting from school. The whole community is anxious that her killer has still escaped detection, and hope that in the next few minutes somebody will recall sightings or reawaken suspicions about someone who'd acted oddly at the time. The story starts and ends in Cath Cobb Woods.
Come on, let's shoot off to the bridge. No, come on, eh?
Did you see him? There's a guy over there with a hood on.
Where?
Over there.
Can't see no.
That's because she's too late. He's gone now.
Claire and her friends often played in Cath Cobb Woods. In fact, the woods are quite close to her home. Her parents were separated, so Claire and her younger sister lived with their mother. Claire was in her 4th year at Romney High.
Claire, you're late. I've already been to work and back, and you're still here. Out of bed, Claire.
All right.
On is the cold water treatment.
She was a great kid. She's not just a daughter, a friend. Shared my clothes with me. I shared her problems if she had any with her. Sometimes I had to play the mother.
Claire, I can't believe you're not at school yet.
I know, I'm going.
You can laugh, but I'm the one that has to answer to the teachers.
I know the pool competition. Got my trophy next week.
From the youth club?
Yeah. Said they'd engrave my name on it. I can't wait.
Great. First of many.
I know.
There. Off to school. See you later, love.
Okay, then.
Be back around about 7, usual time, all right?
Yep.
Okay.
Sure,
Bye.
Hiya. Turn lamp, please. Come on, I'm gonna be late. Ta. Go light. Yeah. Do you want to dance with me? No, I can't. Why?
No, I'm just bored.
Claire, go space to grab, please.
Nurse, my last one.
Okay.
This is the last definite sighting of Claire. Where did she go next?
Meadow. Meadow.
When I turned round, this man suddenly appeared in front of me on the path. He was aged about 25 to 28 years old. He was about 5'6", 5'10". He wore dark clothes. His jacket had a hood, but it wasn't on his head at the time.
It's now 3:20. Was this Claire, or could it have been you?
Good boy.
You ready? Yeah, almost. We'll need that, it's freezing.
He obviously was in a great hurry. I would describe him as 5'6" to 5'8" tall, slight build and dark complexion. The man seemed to come from the woods.
Claire? Claire? Claire!
Awful thoughts were going through my mind, as it was out of Claire's character not to be there. I always knew where Claire was going, and she was never late, from school anyway.
Elaine? Yeah, Claire, she's not round at your place, is she? No. She's not back, you see, and, well, I was just getting a little bit worried because, you know, she never does things like this, no. Well, did you see her leave school, or? No, I gotta go. I'm gonna try and ring Kelly. I've rung round all her friends, and nobody seems to have seen her, you see, and... All right, yes, I'll do that. I'll ring the police right now.
Called the police. I then began a search with some friends around the area of St. Mellons. I felt I had to do something myself. And we ended up in Cathcart Woods. Our last resort, really.
Oh, she'll be fine.
Oh, God. Oh, so...
She'll be fine.
What am I gonna do?
We looked down through years, eh?
Yeah. Right. Well, we'll find her.
Yeah.
She'll be okay.
Anything
we'll
over there?
find her.
No.
Oh. Come on this way.
It was freezing that night. Claire's body was discovered in the morning. She'd been sexually assaulted.
I know you've had overwhelming help from the local community, Colin Jones, but you still want to get to new witnesses. Now, tell me who. You were telling me just before we came on air, people in Cathcart Woods, even though they didn't know Claire had nothing to do with this, you still want everybody who's been in the woods to talk to you. Why?
That's right. Well, we're working on the theory that the person responsible for this had an intimate knowledge of the woods, and therefore these people may have seen the culprit in the woods on a previous occasion.
Even though they had no idea of that, you still want everybody to come forward?
Yes, everyone that uses those woods, please could they come forward, whether it was on the 18th or prior to the 18th of January this year.
What about friends of Claire?
Well, there's been a general reluctance by some of the friends of Claire to tell us all that they know in relation to the Cathcart Woods or indeed habits of Claire. I think there's a variety of reasons for this. That's all I can assure them. They have my personal assurance that they will not get into any trouble. And I ask them to impart in us any information that they're withholding.
So if they've been truanting from school or underage smoking or anything else, you're not interested... I mean, this is a murder inquiry. You're not interested in that?
That is correct.
Will you protect them from that?
Yes, I shall. They have my personal assurance.
OK. You have actually got some other sightings of youngsters in the woods at the time. Just tell us about that.
Yes, we have a sighting at 3:20 of a girl standing on a bridge. And to that end, we're appealing for anyone to come forward. Also, there's a motorist who saw 3 children, school children, run across the Willowbrook Drive towards the general direction of the woods. 2 boys and a girl. It's possible that the girl was Claire.
But if not, or even if it was, you desperately need them to come forward?
We desperately need them to come forward,
OK,
yes.
This is Wednesday, the 18th of January. Now, there was a man also, apart from the one that we've seen, somebody else seen coming out of the woods.
Yes, at 3:25, a man was seen running from the general direction of the woods, across Willowbrook Drive, towards Brookfield Drive. He's described as being 6 foot tall, slim build, fair complexion, fair hair, and had somewhat distinctive clothing.
He had this, or at least this is a replica, of the fairly distinctive hat he was wearing. We should stress, he's not a suspect. You want him to come forward to eliminate himself.
Yes, we would like this person to come forward to eliminate himself.
OK. If there's any way that you can help, please do, particularly if you're a youngster, you haven't come forward up to now because you're worried you might get into trouble over something. I mean, don't worry about that. Call us, please, 0500 600 600. It's a free call here to the studio in London. If you prefer, you can dial the Rumney Police Station in Cardiff. That's on 0122 277 4285. That's 0122 277 4285.
Sort of publicity they've attracted locally, and this gives you an impression of just how serious these offences are. Our reconstruction shows none of this violence, of course, but what it does do is build up a detailed account of him. We hope enough for someone to name him before the reconstruction's over.
The main story this lunchtime, Welsh beef farmers fear a new BSE scare could blight their industry. Welsh beef...
Hello?
I'm awfully sorry, I meant to press number 2. Mrs. Morgan?
Oh, she's moved to the parade.
I wonder if you could write the address down for me, please.
There you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Stephen, Mrs. Morgan's nephew. I wonder if I could have a drink of water. I've got a tickle in my throat. It feels just like a feather.
Oh, wait a minute then.
I obviously felt suspicious of him, and that's why I kept watching every move he made.
Do you mind if I use the telephone? I'll reverse the charges.
Oh, all right then.
I was determined I wasn't going to lose my cool and let him think that I was nervous. So I sat as relaxed as he did in the chair opposite.
Engaged. I'm from Worcester. I did live in Cheltenham before that. When I was here last September or October, there was no water in that lake. There were tractors working in there. I used to go swimming about 15 years ago in a pool over there.
He finished the cigarette and left. It was only then she discovered her handbag had been rifled.
Sorry to disturb you, but have some keys been put through your door?
Keys? What keys?
Mine. I was told they were in the first flat.
Ah, well, you might want to be over there. He's in. His umbrella's there. Ring the bell.
I was told it was an elderly woman's flat.
I had a good look at him, and I would think he would be about 5'8". Sallow complexion, quite a bouffant hairstyle. Then I came in here and stood there where I could see him walk right along, knowing that he'd arrived at Enid Poole's flat.
Though Aunt Enid had failing sight, she was able to live in her flat and was able to make a cup of tea, and with support, she liked her flat very much.
He was in Enid Poole's flat for less than 10 minutes, in which time he attacked the 90-year-old very severely and left her unconscious.
What's up, Dil?
I feel a bit disturbed, Gordon. I've had a funny caller. Can I come in?
Come in.
Would you know him again, though, Dale?
Oh, yes, I had a good look at him. He had a black leather jacket on and some...
Is that him, Dil?
That's him, yes.
Yeah. Looks like if he's going somewhere.
Oh, yes.
When I took my class.
A quarter of a mile away, Maya Locher was making her way home from a weekly pensioners' get-together.
You sure? Take care now. Bye-bye.
My aunt was a retired head teacher, and on that Wednesday afternoon she'd been to the Wednesday Club, which is an offspring of the Towns Women's Guild. She liked to have a little walk, if possible, not every day, but a few times a week.
Hello, Myre. I'm not wearing my hearing aid. Give you a ring later. Bye.
Maya Locher was badly beaten. She too was left unconscious.
We were chatting amongst ourselves again, and then I think it was Gordon said, "He's going out."
Yes, that's him. I wonder where he's going now.
And then suddenly he stopped, and he looked at Laurel Court quite slowly, and that was the last we saw.
2 hours later, Mrs. Poole's stolen cash card was used at this bank in Cardiff. 3 attempts were made to withdraw £200. All were unsuccessful.
About 8 o'clock, I had a telephone call from my cousin in Worcestershire, and she asked me, "Is Aunt Enid all right, or is she ill, or is she out this evening, because I cannot get a reply." So I said, right, I'll try and I'll ring her and see. And then I said to my husband, we must go down straight away and see what's the matter.
When the police arrived, they found Mrs. Poole on the floor. A month later, she's still critically ill. Miss Locher was discovered the next day and is also still in hospital.
Wynne Phillips, you're looking for a violent and heartless man here. These were particularly vicious attacks, weren't they?
That's correct. They were brutal attacks on defenceless old women. Luckily, they're both now recovering in hospital.
Now, you have reason to believe that he's struck again since those incidents.
Yes, I believe he has. About a fortnight ago in the Cardiff area, there were some striking similarities to an offence there, which were very, very similar to the Barry jobs.
But no one was hurt?
No one was hurt in that instance.
Now, obviously, we don't want to alarm elderly people living on their own, but they do presumably want to be on their guard as a result of this. What advice do you give?
Well, don't allow strangers into your homes. Seek ID. If you're not sure of people, then ring the police. Ring neighbours, family, friends. If you think police, then call the police.
So, what do we know about him? You have any fit?
We know he's about 5'8", 5'10" in height. He's of slim to medium build, dark hair, brushed back and possibly gelled. He's of sallow complexion. On the day in question, he was wearing a black leather jacket and turquoise trousers.
And he seems to have a connection with the area.
I think so. Although he may not be a native of Barry, he seems to know quite a bit about the area. Certainly knew that the lake in the Knapp area of Barry last September, October, had been cleaned, had been drained. He also spoke about swimming in the swimming pool there some years previously. He also spoke about Worcester, Cheltenham. He may know something about those areas.
And in the first scene that we saw, he used a peculiar turn of phrase a couple of times. Let's see it again.
I wonder if I could have a drink of water. I've got a tickle in my throat. It feels just like a feather.
Well, wait a minute, then.
Just like a feather. It's an unusual thing to say.
It is unusual, and it's unusual in most parts of South Wales, I would think, but somebody must know who uses that type of phrase. If they do, if he fits the description, then please give us a ring, let us know.
Now, we have some items here similar to the ones that he took, the Barclays
that's
Connect card.
That's right.
Now, what can you tell us about that?
Well, the name Enid Poole is on that. We've not recovered it. Anybody who's seen that, if anybody's been given that, found it, please contact us.
And something slightly more identifiable, perhaps, is this key fob?
Yes, he certainly locked Mrs. Poole in her home. He took the keys and he took a fob just like that, a lace inset with the letter E.
So this is a B, but it's very similar to this.
Very similar to
with the
that,
letter E.
yes. We'd be interested in anybody who may come across that.
Well, Wyn Phillips, thank you very much indeed. Obviously, you're concerned he may strike again, so it's essential, obviously, that he's caught.
Yes.
Well, here's how to help if you do know. Just make that free call, 0500 600 600. Make a note of it, 0500 600 600. It's good for all the cases tonight. Or you can call the incident room in Barry direct. That's on 01446 731 609. That's Barry 731 609.
Start by going back. 2 months ago, we reconstructed one of Britain's most appalling murders, perhaps the worst crime in Wales this century. Mandy Powers was 34, her daughters Emily and Kate were 8 and 10, her mother, Doris Dawson, was 80. The injuries they sustained were savage beyond comprehension. Since our last appeal, a host of new clues has emerged. So it's Saturday, the 26th of June. It was a memorable afternoon in Wales when the national rugby team beat South Africa for the first time in 90 years. But it was a terrible night in Kelvin Road in Clydach in Swansea. We start with Mandy's sister.
My sister, Mandy, she was a wonderful mother. She loved her girls. They were her life. And she was good to my mother. They were such a loving family that they wouldn't hurt anybody. Just seemed so odd. So unreal. Somebody would want to hurt them.
Initially, the house would have been smoke-filled, and therefore they're unable to see anything. But once the casualties are brought out into the open, the horror became a reality. Some of them have young families of their own, and to witness the deaths of 2 young, beautiful sisters must have indeed been a traumatic event for them. This is the most tragic and horrific experience that we have had to date.
How much do I owe you?
£2.50, thank you.
Mandy and the children got home late that night. Mandy had been babysitting for her cousin and a nearby estate. At midnight, the crucial new witness, the cab driver, was called to the 3 Compasses in Clydach.
Taxi for Mark!
He was about my height, maybe a little bit shorter, 5'6", 5'7", stocky, black hair, spiked, earring in each ear.
Who was this who took the taxi booked for Mark? Come forward and eliminate yourself.
Where to?
Kelvin Road, mate. Get the on in.
See the game?
They're all class, but don't they?
What a game, man. 29, 19, I couldn't
He was very happy, cheerful at the time. Well, most people were that time of night because Wales won. You see, he had a few drinks, but he wasn't drunk. He sounded quite local.
Shoe polish is key, isn't it?
That's right,
June, can you mind the front a minute? I'm just going to call a cab.
Next, we're trying to trace everyone who was at or near the chip shop on the Mond in Clydach that Saturday night.
Can I have a taxi for Giovanni's? Yeah, as soon as you can. Okay, cheers, cheers.
And who was the girl in the white puffer jacket who used the phone at 1:45? She won't know it, but she's a very important witness. This is less than 100 yards from Mandy's house.
It's 1:30, mate.
No worries, mate.
Cheers, man.
Catch you, yeah?
Okay, take care.
Hello, 16. Have you took a passenger?
Yeah, 16, free now, Lil. Go ahead.
It's picking up a lady from Giovanni's Tips Up on the Mond. Going to Penedrate.
Yeah, okay, got that. On my way.
But I don't know why she's stuck in my mind. I just remember seeing her sitting on the wall. She was dark, she was tan, she was a pretty woman. She had quite a lot of jewellery. You noticed the jewellery.
Excuse me, do you mind if I take this one? I'm in a real rush.
Sorry, love, I've been working all night. I'm off home. Is this taxi for me?
I don't know, I was just told to come and do a pickup at the chippy.
Penedrate.
Who was this woman? Again, she's crucial to the inquiry. A few minutes later, the cab got back to the Mond.
A taxi, love?
Yes.
She was about 5'5", black wavy hair, quite conservatively dressed, nice smartly dressed, petite.
Where to?
Kelvin Road.
You see the rugby then? Huh? 29-19, 10 points on the South Africans.
I tried to have a conversation, she just totally blanked me. Strange, because normally get 1 or 2 words out of people, but nothing at all.
Not into rugby?
She was sitting there with her hands on her lap, with her head down, as if she was in a world of her own.
This'll do here.
This is outside Mandy's house. This is the key person that needs to be identified. But there are still others who may be witnesses too. The couple walking down Gethlionan Road at about 2:30. And the man in a bomber jacket who was walking up towards Kelvin Road carrying something under his arm. Please come forward tonight. There's still a row to be eliminated. Were you arguing near Mandy's house that night?
It was obviously what woke me up. It was definitely a very big slanging match between two people. The female sounded more distressed than what the male did, but the male voice was more dominant in the argument.
And we must still trace the couple walking past the Upper Ford cottages at about 4:15 a.m. They're a few minutes' walk from Mandy's house, but before the fire was discovered.
When we got there, it was chaos, really. Firemen, ambulance men, and I just remember just getting out of the car and running up the steps to the house where they were all lying outside. And it was raining. And I was thinking, well, they all were getting wet.
Martin, plainly the woman dropped by the taxi is the person you have to eliminate above all. You've just got to find her. Now, the fact is, she hasn't gone to any of the neighbouring houses, so presumably she went into number 9. If so, she's going to be very frightened about coming forward. She's going to be into this up to her neck.
Well, she shouldn't be frightened. If she had no part to play in this murder, she should come forward and contact us. It's as simple as that, really. Now, I would ask, it took us 5 weeks to trace the taxi driver. It may take us some time to trace her, but we will trace her and we will speak to her. So please, if she is listening, or you know who she is, contact us immediately.
Now, presumably she hasn't come from very far afield. You didn't have her own car or anything. So for people in that general area, just give us the best description you've got of her.
Well, she's in her early 30s. She's quite tanned. In fact, the e-fit doesn't do her justice. She is described as being quite attractive. She's about a size 12. She was wearing black clothing that night and a lot of gold jewellery.
Now, talking of jewellery, you discovered at the scene of the murders This is identical to it, a chain like this. It's gold. Tell us about it and its significance.
It's a solid gold chain. It's manufactured in 1989. It was bought from places like Argos, such like those sort of places. It's sold for just under £300 in 1989. Now, I've been interested to know who actually has got a necklace like that and has not had it since June of this year.
So this is a solid gold.
Men's
or females, do you know?
It's unisex. It can be worn by either male or female.
And somebody who hasn't had that since Saturday the 26th of June.
That's right.
OK, there's a £30,000 reward on this. Let me just say, incidentally, that after the last programme, that unlicensed taxi driver who was identified, well, we promised, the police promised, that there would be no prosecutions, and they've been as good as their word. He hasn't been charged with any offences. All they want to do is to clear up this terrible multiple murder. So whoever you are, whatever is holding you back, if anything at all, call in help. Think of the children, think of the grandmother, and think of what happened to Mandy. It's a free call here to the studio in London, 0500 600 600. That number's going to be on the screen through much of the evening. Or ring the local incident room on 01792 562 731. At Swansea, 562 731.
I've seen news about it described as a ritual killing. The reality is less dramatic, and it's desperately sad. It's the murder 3 weeks ago in Anglesey of 90-year-old Mabel Leyshon.
I met Mabel about 3.5 years ago through delivering Meals on Wheels, and we just got on so well.
Oh, hello. Oh, it's nice to hear your voice.
Oh, she could talk. She used to like to chat with her friends on the phone quite a bit. It was a job to get a word in edgeways sometimes.
I'm sorry, what did you say? What about you? What about the new flat?
I don't think she liked being on her own. Not day after day. She always used to mention that. All she had was a radio. She would listen to the radio a lot. She used to have trouble with a hearing aid. When she was on her own at home, she would switch it off to save the batteries. Every Sunday I used to take her a Sunday lunch.
Mrs. Leyshon!
She was a lady that would like you to be very punctual.
Can you hear me? Mabel.
It was unusual for a blinds not to be opened by just after 12 on a Sunday.
Mabel, it's Jane. Are you all right? Mabel? Mabel? Can you hear me? Oh my God.
I daren't think about how she would have reacted if she saw someone strange enter her room. She was only a little lady.
Police found Mrs. Leyshon sitting in a chair. She died after being repeatedly stabbed. Her heart had been cut out and left at the scene. 2 fireside pokers were laid out in a cross or an X on the floor. Numerous witnesses saw a blue van outside Mrs. Leyshon's house the week before she died, which is curious because she never mentioned she had builders. One man was taller than the other with dark hair in a fringe over his forehead. The shorter man was stocky with a crew cut. They're not prime suspects, but they have to be eliminated. And a blue van was also seen the day she was killed. It may well be coincidence, but we need to find the owners.
And I don't think I'll ever come across someone like her again.
Alan, I must say, in my time on Crimewatch, this is one of the worst cases I've come across.
Fiona, I've 25 years' experience as a police officer, and I've never seen anything like this before.
The blue van that we saw there in the reconstruction, first of all, how can viewers help with that?
It's important that we trace the occupants of that van. Probably a couple of vans seen over a few days prior to Mrs. Leyshon's death. A lot of my officers' time is being spent on trying to trace those individuals. They may well be just carrying out casual labour locally, but it's important that I know whether they've been into Mrs. Leyshon's premises on the days before her murder.
And you don't believe they are prime suspects?
No, indeed not. I think in all probability that they will be eliminated from my inquiry, but I would wish to focus my time and my officers' time on other lines of inquiry, but it's important that I conclude that matter.
And what about the murderer? What did you know about him?
I've used the services of a behavioural profiler, and the thoughts are he's local, that he has mental illness but may well not have presented in the past to mental health teams, to doctors, to psychiatrists, that he is withdrawn, socially isolated, that he will have demonstrated some extremely strange behaviour and may well be living in the community alone or with elderly parents.
Do you think he would have known Mabel?
The thoughts are that there would have been some prior contact with her, not necessarily close contact, but he would have been aware of her, and because I can rule out theft as a motive. The burglary was not the main purpose for the offender breaking into the property.
So you believe he was local? He may have been showing signs of delusional behaviour, erratic behaviour. He may not, of course. He may have been able to hide that. There was... we talked about at the beginning there that the newspapers describing this as a ritual killing, the fact that Mabel's heart was cut out and the pokers left in a cross shape. Do you think he was part, or this was part of a cult in some way?
There's no evidence to show that, and I've sought advice from various people, and nobody's been able to make the link with the pokers in the cross position or the removal of the heart with a ritualistic killing. But it clearly is delusional, it is strange behaviour, and I would expect that the individual responsible has demonstrated some strange behaviour in the community prior to the killing. So I'm asking our community, friends, relatives, neighbours of individuals that fit the description that I've talked about, to contact the Crimewatch programme or my murder investigation team as soon as possible.
Because it may be that there is a family in the local area who have concerns about a family member, and presumably he would have had blood-stained clothing, would he not?
The expectations are he would have been heavily blood-stained, and again, if somebody is aware of somebody who on the Sunday the 25th of November has been blood-stained, or in fact has not been seen during the night, 24th, 25th of November, or the behaviour strange, then please contact us.
OK, Al, thanks very much.
Remember what we're looking for, most probably a local man. He knew Mabel lived there, and who may have been behaving so oddly that people who knew him, especially his family, as we just heard, may have been worried about him. And because there are some Welsh-only speakers in the area and other people who feel more comfortable speaking Welsh, DS Keith Jones has a short appeal in Welsh.
Rydym yn awyddus I siarad gyda'r dynion gyda'r fan las a welwyd yng nghartre Mrs Leyshon. Rydym yn bendant fod y dynion yn lleol ac mae'n angenrheidiol ein bod yn cysylltu gyda nhw fel tystion. Bysai dillad y llofrudd wedi steinio a gwaed, rydym hefyd eisiau clywed gen aelodau teulu neu ffrindiau sydd wedi bod yn amheus ynglŷn â ymddygiad unigolyn yn y pentref neu'r cylch.
Please call. If there's any suspicions you have, obviously it's hard if there's anyone in your own family, it's very hard to believe it could be them, but any suspicions, call us here in the studio, 0500 600 600, or the Murder Inquiry Room, 01492 518 383. And several people watching Crimewatch tonight will certainly have their own hunches. In fact, someone might even know who did it. So here with new evidence is the reopened file on Geraldine Hughes and Pauline Floyd.
The area they were found, I passed that area umpteen times a week. And it'll never, ever go from my mind. Never, ever.
Consul 1 from Sergeant Jones. We discovered the body of a young girl in Llandar Woods.
567 control. Could you arrange some tape? We need to cordon off the area.
We can imagine what they went through.
They must have been terrified.
Sarge! There's another one, yeah!
We live with that every day of our lives. To think what them two girls went through. And that is the nightmare. Constant nightmare, night after night.
Geraldine was very bubbly, very lively. She loved her dogs and her cats and her rabbits. Pauline was quieter. She was very small, like a little doll.
She always used to have these the freckles, but she always used to say, "Why did I have freckles?" And she, you know, she used to try and wipe them off sometimes, but there were so many.
On the night of the murders, the girls arranged to meet outside the Smith's Arms pub in Neath Abbey, and from there they planned to travel into Swansea.
I was going to go with Geraldine and Pauline to Swansea, but because I had started a new job, I didn't have much money, so I just didn't go.
That Saturday was the day of the annual Neath Fair, and all the buses travelling back to Swansea were full.
It's going to be hours before we get one now.
It's 3 now. It wasn't unusual to hitchhike. It was a thing that was done, and you wasn't afraid to do it. We thumbed lifts, and a lot of other girls of our age thumbed lifts at that time.
Oh, thanks for stopping. Do you want a lift, girls?
Where are you going, Ab?
Top rank in Swansea. We would do that at 8:30. What are you doing here then?
I was picking some people up from a wedding in Swansea about midnight. Just driving up. What's the time, really? Not direct me, girls. I'm a stranger in these parts, up in the valley, see?
The driver of that minibus was never traced, but if he has any recollection of the journey all those years ago, his evidence might now make all the difference. Once in Swansea, the girls went to what was then the top rank on Kingsway.
We used to dance all night. Our feet would be aching at the end of the evening. We used to thoroughly enjoy the dancing. Mark Bolan was our hero.
So they decided to hitchhike back to Llandar, where Geraldine lived. Many people said they'd seen Geraldine and Pauline getting into a light-coloured car, possibly an Austin or Morris 1100. Did you see them, or were you the driver that gave them a lift?
Two bubbly girls, aren't they? Enjoying life. Just starting out, fashion and all this.
This was the last known sighting of Pauline and Geraldine alive. But a light-coloured car was later seen over a half-hour period next to the copse where the girls were later found. Was it innocently parked here by someone who was too frightened to come forward at the time? The copse is only half a mile from Geraldine's home. Maybe the girls asked to be dropped off here so that they could take a shortcut back to the house.
Over here is the spot where the body of Pauline was found, and it's clear from the forensic evidence and the examination of the scene that at some stage both Pauline and Geraldine were together at this spot when they were attacked. The evidence suggests then that Geraldine has attempted to run through the copse and has almost made it to the main road. Sadly, within yards of the roadway, the killer has caught her and dragged her back into the wood, where he has then attacked her. Both Geraldine and Pauline were strangled with ligatures, struck on the back of the head, and were sexually assaulted during the attack.
The things that they have missed out on, that I have had myself. I've got children and grandchildren, and it's just what they have missed.
It's taken its toll on both families, and especially for our father. He's 87 now. And that's his only wish after it happened, that he'd live. For him to know the name of the person, you know, responsible.
Paul, it's desperately sad, but it horrified people at the time. And if they haven't come forward over the last 27 years, why should they come forward now?
Yes, there is an old adage, Nick, that time is a great healer. But having spoken to the families, I can tell you that they remain as devastated and broken-hearted now as they were 27 years ago. But there may be men out there that were spoken to at the time and may feel that they're suspected of the offence or might have been suspected of the offence. And I would ask them now to come forward. We can now eliminate them from the inquiry.
Very simple elimination with a swab.
5 minutes with a cotton swab.
What about people who had suspicions at the time?
There will be no recriminations. There might be people out there that gave false alibis at the times to possibly brothers, husbands, sons. We would ask them now to search their conscience and come forward and give us a name. That's all we need.
And even if people didn't do anything like give a false alibi, they just had, I'm not sure about so-and-so. I mean, they might not have come forward because they don't want to get so-and-so into trouble on what's nothing more than suspicion. But now that suspicion's important because you can eliminate it.
Absolutely, we can eliminate. We don't need to ask questions as such. It's a simple procedure. Just please come forward and tell us anything you know about these killings.
Now, these two murders are bad enough, but there's a possibility, I know you haven't formally linked them, there's a possibility that they are linked to a series of rapes where ligatures were used as well in a sort of 10-mile area where this happened.
Yes, there were two other quite brutal attacks with the use of ligatures. And what I would ask, Nick, is if there are any young women of the time out there that possibly...
1972, 1973?
1972, 1973, that were possibly attacked or approached by a man in a manner that might have caused them some concern. Please contact us.
Not just in Llandar, but anywhere around Swansea?
Within about a 10-mile radius of the murder scene. I'd ask those women to contact us now. They may hold vital information.
Well, please, if there's anything you know at all, any suspicions you've got, and you've heard, even if you gave a false alibi, it doesn't matter now. Just please call, and the DNA swab is so simple, so quick for elimination. The studio number is 0500 600 600. The incident room is on 01 639 889 127. Or you can email us at crimewatchuk, that's cwuk@bbc.co.uk. In the next case, it was much more complicated, but not surprisingly, since the crime had baffled everyone for close on 30 years. In the early 1970s, there were 3 murders in South Wales, all of teenage girls who'd been travelling home at night. Paul Bethel was then a young detective.
Well, events first started in July of 1973 when the body of Sandra Newton was found in a disused culvert.
Sandra was 16. She'd been out for a drink with her boyfriend in Briton Ferry just outside Neath. She left him sometime after midnight to walk the 5 miles home.
She was carried down off the embankment out of the motor vehicle, and she was laid quite reverently, I think it has to be said, on the stones here in the culvert. She had an injury, a bruise to the right side of her chin, and she'd in fact been strangled with her own skirt. Within 8 weeks of the discovery of Sandra, the bodies of Geraldine and Pauline were found at Llandar.
Pauline Floyd and Geraldine Hughes had been out for a night in Swansea, and like many young people at the time, they hitched a ride back home. But they never arrived. Their bodies were found in a copse near the village of Llandar.
It's always been one of the enigmas about this whole case as to what exactly happened in the copse. We know that the girls must have been together. We know that at some stage when they were attacked they were together because Geraldine's blood was found on Pauline's coat. And then Geraldine had somehow come round and tried to run off. This man, thinking he had left both girls for dead, heard Geraldine trying to make her escape and come back into the copse, chased her and sadly caught her. Both young girls had received substantial blows to the top of the head. At some stage then both girls were raped and they were strangled.
There was a massive investigation, but at the time there was nothing to prove a link between the Llandar killings and the murder of Sandra Newton 8 weeks before. And though there were eventually almost 35,000 people in the inquiry system, there was nothing to identify the killer. So late in 1974, the investigation was scaled down. But unsolved murders are never abandoned, and in 1990, with the advent of DNA techniques, Paul Bethel decided to take another look.
The clothing of all three girls had always been kept at the laboratory. We knew that we had crime scene stains, and so the potential was there. It was just a matter of seeing if the new technology could help us in any way.
We tried some crime stains from the girls, but unfortunately the technology then wasn't sensitive enough. But we had the presence of mind to keep material back, knowing that there was future advances coming.
For a further 8 years, nothing happened. But by 1998, DNA techniques had advanced enough to have another go.
We started to produce a profile, and over the period of the next 18 months or so, we managed to get a full profile of the crime stain and the male offender.
But now they had a DNA profile, who, if any, of all the people in the inquiry did it match? The police had to prioritise, so 2 detectives were asked to select the top 500 prospects.
You have to believe that the individual is in the case papers, and then you have to climb into your time machine, as it were, and go back to 1973 and look for that individual.
It's quite a daunting task in that there was up to 35,000 people who were spoken to at some point in relation to the murders. Myself and DC Bale were in this room more or less for 8 months. Due to the amount of paperwork here, one lapse of concentration, and we could have lost the killer.
Over 30 years, obviously, people had moved away, moved to other parts of the UK. How did we find these people all over the country? Well, certainly I felt that Crimewatch was the answer.
In January last year, we featured the case with spectacular results. You've had an avalanche of calls, an avalanche of names.
Yes, absolutely overwhelmed by the calls, Nick. We've had a combination of people from the original case papers 27 years ago, fresh names that we're interested in now and we need to look at. Witnesses from the night in question, so we've got a great deal of work to do. I recall taking calls myself in the studio, and we were actually asked by the studio staff to stop answering the phones because they needed to close the studio and clean up.
Crimewatch had appealed on the 2 killings at Llandar, but around the same time there was a scientific breakthrough on the murder of Sandra Newton.
We were supplied with her boyfriend's sample for elimination purposes, and when we compared his profile and her profile, we realised that there was a third person there. And looking at the profile, I realised there were similarities between that and the Llandar case. So I knew the profile almost off by heart at that point. When I compared them, it was an exact match.
In essence, we knew then, for the first time in 28 years, that the murders of Sandra, Geraldine and Pauline were committed by the same man.
One name that came in through Crimewatch was Joseph William Cappan. He was already on the police priority list of 500, but they now took a closer look at him. 30 years back, he'd been suspected by a detective now retired, Elwyn Whedon.
When I found out that a white 1100 motor car was involved in the murders at Llandar, I knew that Joe Cappan was the owner of a white 1100 motor car. He fitted the description of the person that we were looking for, and as a result, I decided to submit his name into the inquiry.
Listen, lads, I've got someone you can have a look at here. This chap may be worth having a look at if you want to take a few notes.
Aye, let me get a card.
Yeah, Kappa, the name is. Joseph Kappa.
Joseph Kappa.
Port Talbot. Now, he's got a Morris 1100, and it's white.
Oh.
And the registration is 6803DF.
6803.
Yeah, he's got bushy hair, fits the bill. I think he might be worth having a look at.
I'll put him in the system and we'll give him a visit.
All right.
Thanks,
Cheers,
mate.
lads. All the best.
Take care. Mr. Cappan? Joe Cappan?
Yeah, that's me.
Hi, DC Thomas Phillips from Port Talbot Police Station. And if we could ask you a few questions. We're investigating the Llandar murder about the 2 girls. As you know, we're trying to trace all the owners of light-coloured Austin 1100. And we just wanted to eliminate you from the inquiries, really. Do you mind if I take some fingerprint samples and some fibre samples from the car?
No, carry on. Carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Cappan. Can I have the key?
Sure.
Mr. Cappan, would you like to tell me where you were on the night of the 15th of September?
Well, I was at the bird show with my canaries in Morriston in the afternoon.
Oh, okay.
Then I decided to go to the Neath Fair.
I suppose I left there about 9:30, and then I got home, watched a bit of TV.
I seen to my birds, and I went to bed.
Right.
Cappen's story appeared to check out, so he simply became another name in the system.
Hi, Helen. Right.
Did you call in and see Mr. Cappen after?
Yeah, we gave him a call. He had an alibi.
So nothing at all? Well, we taken tapings from the car. Yeah, nothing came back. Okay.
No similar fibres.
No
okay. You off down the pub after?
Yes, yeah.
Hey, we'll see you down there.
We'll see you.
Ta-da.
Yeah, bye. Bye.
So, ruled out in 1973, but now Joe Cappen was looked at once again, and there was a surefire way to rule him in or out for good. They simply needed his DNA.
When the research team went to visit the house, in order, as they thought at that time, to obtain a mouth swab or buccal swab from him, we were informed by his family that, in fact, he had died from a protracted illness in 1990.
The police approached members of his family and obtained DNA samples, and from that we could work out a partial profile for Joe Cappen himself. It wasn't a full profile. When we compared that to the Llandar and the Sandra Newton crime stains, it was clear he could not be excluded at that stage. As he was dead and had been buried, the only way to get a sample from him would be to have an exhumation.
So earlier this year, Joseph Cappen became the first ever murder suspect to be exhumed.
We needed to do this to put a lot of matters to rest for the families of Cappen, for the families of the girls, to show that the individual lying in that grave was in fact the same individual that had left that crime scene stain at Llandar and Tonmawr.
In June, 30 years after the murders, came confirmation that Cappen's DNA did match that found on all 3 girls.
As soon as we had the confirmation that Cappen was the killer, the first thing we did was to go and visit the families. It was nice for us to sit in their living room with a cup of tea and basically tell them that we now knew who in fact had killed their daughter.
Finding the killer now has meant that we can put the bad times behind us and perhaps look at the good times and the fun she had.
It's just relief for both families so that they can get on with their lives and put this matter to rest.
It's a very strange feeling to have worked in 1973 as a 21-year-old, as a young detective in those days, and then eventually led the team that actually found the killer. That's probably something that it's fair to say every detective would wish for.
Paul, Joe Cappen's dead now. He's been dead, what, 12 years, but you've still got a major incident room running. Now, tell us what's going on.
Yes, we still need to timeline Cappen. I need to know where he has been, where he was for some 28, 29 years, between 1960 and 1988. Of course, we know he died in 1990. What part of the countries did he visit? We know that he's travelled to the north of England, that he visited the Lincolnshire area, where he had family some years ago. But I really need to know where this man has been.
Why are you so anxious so long after his death?
Well, I've always been of the view that if this man was capable of killing 3 young girls within 2 to 3 miles virtually of his own home, using his own car, then certainly he would have no qualms whatsoever about killing elsewhere or in fact attacking young women in other parts of the country.
Of course, he was a professional driver, so he travelled a lot, which means he could have committed crimes anywhere.
That's right. We know that he was employed as a driver. He drove buses, he drove lorries, and what I would ask is for employers to have a look at the photograph, the name, and search their memories to see, did they employ this man as a driver many years ago?
I don't want to ask you to sensationalise things, but is it your view that he is likely to be an even worse serial killer than we already know about?
Well, the truth is, of course, we don't really know, but certainly I have the feeling that this man would have killed elsewhere in the country. If this man will attack within a few miles of his own home, using his own car, in an area that he would have been known to people, then certainly I feel in other parts of the country and other parts of the world, he would have no concerns whatsoever about carrying out some serious crime.
What about crimes well short of murder? Just terrifying women, attacking them, rape?
Yes, well, we've had a number of calls already from women that have come forward that were attacked some decades ago, in fact 2 or 3 decades ago, by Cappen. They've now told us their stories, and what I would ask is if there are any women out there that know Cappen, that had met him and had any sort of experience with him whatsoever, if they would make contact with us.
OK, if there's any way you think you can help, please call 0500 600 600.